Hello, and welcome to this week's episode of Yes, You Are Brave. Happy Women's History Month. Super excited. Let's jump in. Let's talk about the women who made us brave and how we can use that power from the past to help us fight the battles that really matter in our lives right now, today. Okay, so I have been thinking a lot about this Women's History Month, partly because I'm in places where people talk about it. And also, the last couple of months have been really kind of cool exploring my relationship with the women in my personal past. So I want to talk today about our own the women in our own personal history and how they've made us brave and how they have taught us what they've taught us and how they've helped us learn how to fight. We'll get to that in just a second. So the last couple months have been an interesting time for me. I've been really, like I said, I've been exploring some different things and having different kind of interesting experiences with the people in my own personal past. So one of the things, couple of stories I want to tell about making peace with the past and with the people in the past. So both of my grandmothers have passed away. I'm on the younger side of the grandkids, and my grandmothers have both been gone for nearly 20 years now. One of them for 18, one of them for just over 20 years. And it's kind of been difficult. And I've lost a couple of adopted grandmothers along the way as well. But I've had a couple of experiences lately with both of my grandmothers. So I want to tell you first about those experiences. First one was that a couple of, 3 or 4 weeks ago, I decided it was finally time to take the Christmas quilt off of our bed. And yes, I know it was like the middle of February and it had been off for a while, but then it came bedtime and it was cold and I just threw it back on. So I took the Christmas quilt off the bed. But it was still cold enough that we needed a second quilt. And so I went to the tote underneath my bed and I pulled it out and I said, okay, what are we going to put on the quilt, the bed now? And I decided that I was going to put my wedding quilt on the bed. And this seems not that big of a deal. But I took it out of the tote. And then I took it out of the plastic bag that it was in. And I put it on my bed. Now, this particular wedding quilt, now it's not that big of a deal that it hadn't been on my bed yet. I've been married for it'll be 2 years this weekend. But the thing about this quilt is that my paternal grandmother, made it for me before she died. One of her gifts was that she could make you feel so special and so loved, and that she wanted everybody to be acknowledged. And she made quilts for all of her grandkids by hand. Every part of it was done by hand. She had quilts, or quilt tops at least, for all, I think there's 29 of us, 29 of her grandkids, before she passed away. So mine was actually the last one that she quilted. She quilted it. My aunt helped her quilt it the summer before she passed away. And this is the first time in over 20 years that this quilt has actually been used the way it was intended. It has been in a bag, carefully wrapped in a bag, in a trunk at my mom's house for a long time. And then when I got married, I brought it up here with me and had it at my wedding. But I hadn't put it on my bed yet until just a couple of weeks ago. And it was crazy, the experience of taking that out of the bag and putting it on my bed. Felt my grandma's love. I felt her comfort, the faith that she had in me. All by taking this thing out of the bag and putting it on my bed. And it has been on my bed for the last 3 or 4 weeks. I don't even know how long. And I find myself pausing quite frequently, run my fingers over the stitches to see the small little imperfections that are there, and just feel that my grandmother is in that quilt. Her love is in that quilt. And it's kind of interesting. I won't go into it, but it feels like the quilt that she made me fits my husband and I perfectly. The quilt that she made me when I was 17 fits my husband and I now, 20 years later. It fits us perfectly. It is a perfect little metaphor for us and who we are. So that is one of the experiences that I've had this week with the woman, or this recently with women in my own personal history. The other thing that happened a couple of months ago was with my maternal grandmother, who she was the one we lived in the same town as my maternal grandmother. My other grandmother, she lived in Idaho. We only saw them through 3, maybe sometimes 4 times a year. But my grandmother, my mother's mother, she lived there in town, and I spent a lot of time at my grandma's house. Sometimes my parents would leave me with my grandparents when they needed to go, because we lived in the middle of nowhere. If they needed to go into town or something, they would leave me with my grandparents. When I was young, we spent a lot of time there. We're very involved, very together. And my grandmother was from that working generation, right? She grew up during the Great Depression. She saved everything. She was very much a work person. She kept an immaculate house. She always had, up until she got to where she was not able, she had a garden. She had flower beds. She took a lot of pride in her home and keeping it nice. She taught me a lot of things, how to work. My first job that I got any money for was going to grandma's house and cleaning her house every week. Vacuuming her living room floor for an hour, no joke, because she insisted that that's how it had to be done. And so I was closer to that grandmother, but it was a little bit of a different kind of relationship. And as much as I hate to say this, my grandma got a little ornery as she got older and her health declined. And a lot of that ornery came out towards my mom, towards my mother. My mother was her primary caregiver, and she worked really hard after my grandfather died to make sure my grandma could stay in her own house. But my mother took care of a lot of the day-to-day of my grandmother's life. She was up there 2 or 3 times a day, making sure that she was taking her pills, that she had what she needed. She's the one that, cut her hair, did her hair, got to where she would, all of the things. And so sometimes my grandma was a little ornery. Part of it was because she was not in great health at the end, and it kind of came out towards my mother. So I realized that I had a little bit of a chip on my shoulder towards my grandmother because of the way that she had treated my mom in the last couple of years of her life. And about a couple months ago, I had this experience where in my writing group, we wrote letters. One of our writing things, we wrote letters to somebody to say goodbye or farewell or something. And I ended up writing this letter to my grandmother. And it was really interesting because what came out was that what I actually needed from her. Thanked her for what she'd done for me and what she'd taught me, and kind of just told her what I needed. I said, I don't need you to tell me how to live my life. I need you to just believe in me and what I can do. And there was this really cool moment of feeling like we had made peace. Like I had made peace with her, and there had been this truce called, and there was no longer fighting against her. And I've been thinking about this, calling this truce between the generations, right? For some reason, there's this big kind of like struggle always between generations. And I understand where it's coming from. We all want to get out. We all want to do our own thing. We all want to make our own way. And sometimes we understand the way that the world is changing better than others, or sometimes we just have no choice but to accept it, where sometimes the older generations are not quite ready. But lately I've been really exploring this, putting down the fight between the generations, and even things with my mother. I was able to spend a week with her recently and just spend a lot of time talking to her and asking her questions and really building the relationship where it's struggled the last several years. I'm not going to lie. There has been a struggle. There's been a strain there. And to finally realize that I could put down this fight between me and my mother and me and my grandmothers and me and all these women that came before me, because I realized something recently when I was working on my book. My book is called You're Not Broken, Just Single. And in it, I talk about some of the ideas that we have about relationships and stuff and where they come from. And at first I was very, very adamant that they came from these past generations that just didn't understand. And I was really harsh and I was really mean about it. Thank goodness nobody's going to get to read that draft. But then I realized later that they were just doing the best that they could with what they had, with their situation, with their circumstances. They were just doing the best that they could. And to be perfectly honest, they couldn't have the same ideas about marriage and family and all of those type of things that we have now, because the world was completely different. And so as I have worked really hard the last couple of months since the new year, to kind of just let those things go. I don't need to be fighting with my grandmothers anymore. I don't need to be wishing that my mother was somebody different, or that she had different ideas or whatever. I just get to, if I will allow it, which is funny because this is my word for the year, if I will allow it, those women will just stand behind me with all the love and support and amazing strength that they can, and lend me every strength of their power if I will allow it. If I stop insisting that they be something that they were not. If I stop fighting against them. And I was thinking about that and like, why do we fight? We always fight against that other generation, right? And I think that that is something, they say that one of the reasons that the kids are always naughtiest with their parents is because that's their safe place. That's their safe place to push boundaries and try things out, and they don't have to be as perfect when they're with their parents. And so I think that there is a purpose behind that fighting between generations a little bit, right? It's our training wheels so that we can, when we get out into the world, we know how to stand up for ourselves. We know how to question if something is right for us or not. We've learned how to ask the questions and maybe push a little bit and fight a little bit. But I think that if we don't let go of that fight between the generations, us and the past generations, and that's the only fight we're fighting our whole lives, we will miss some of the most important, some of the most significant fights of our lives. We will not have the strength to fight for a future if we keep fighting against the past. There was a reason. They were our safe places. They were there to help make us strong and help make us brave and help push us out of our comfort zones and push us out of the nest and help us to do better than maybe they did. I know that I remember my mother talking about when I was young that your kids are supposed to do better than you do. She said, you always want your kids to do a little bit better than you do, to be a little bit more educated or a little bit this or that. And when I think about it, they did. We have improved, right? My grandmother did not have a high school education. She did not graduate from high school. My mother graduated from high school, and she went on to cosmetology school, and she went to school there, and she became a licensed professional, and she did that. I was able to go to college, get a bachelor's degree. There has been some solid improvement. There wouldn't have been that improvement unless those previous generations, those previous people were pushing a little bit to be better, to go find your own way and do something better. So, and I think about sometimes, bringing this back to the women who make us brave. Sometimes that brave, I think, comes up in different ways. I know for me, it has been difficult because part of me, I wanted different things than my mother wanted. I wanted to travel. I wanted to see the world. My mom has no desire to travel. She doesn't really care that much. She doesn't like crowds. She doesn't like people. She doesn't love navigating new places. But when I decided to travel and I decided I wanted to go do those things, she was more than happy to support me in those things. She didn't want to do it, but I could go do it, and she was perfectly happy for me to do it. And I think that is the beauty of it, is when we stop fighting, when we put down the fight between us and the generations, we can find some serious power. We can find some serious support in that. And then we can have the fight, the strength and the confidence to fight the fights that really matter. Because I think there are some things in our world today that we really do need to be fighting for. There are some fights in our own personal lives that we need to be having. We need to be going out and doing the work to make those changes and make things better. But if we're constantly fighting this other one that doesn't really need to be fought anymore, then we're not going to have what we need to fight for tomorrow. So I hope this has made sense. This is the second attempt because the first one just didn't make a whole lot of sense. But I just want you to know that you're amazing and you're wonderful. And I want you to take some time maybe and put this fight down. It's probably not necessary. Yes, you needed to have some headbutting, some boundary pushing, some stretching with your mother or your grandmother. But do you still? Especially if they're gone. Especially if they're dead. My grandmothers are both passed away, have both passed away. And I find myself some days still feeling like I'm fighting with my grandmother. And I realized I don't have to anymore. And my own personal belief is that they don't ever truly leave us, that they are dead, but they're not completely gone, and they will be here and they will support us. And they will do everything they can to help our lives be better if we will allow them to do so. So that is what I have for you today. I hope that you can find some peace in the past and find a way to put things down, put down fights that are no longer necessary, and let people be who they're going to be. My grandmothers are never changing. They're not. They're going to be who they are because they just are. My mother is amazing and wonderful, and she loves me with everything that she has, even though sometimes it's not how I would like it to be. And when we realize that, let people love us and let people support us in the way that they can instead of some weird idea that we have, then things are better. So I would challenge you to look at your own past and the women in your own personal history this month and see the lessons, see the love that they gave for you or that they were trying to give you. Sometimes it didn't know. I'm sure it doesn't always work. Sometimes they missed the mark, but what were they trying to do? And how can you let that fight go with them and just let them love you and support you from wherever they are and find the power in the past? Because there is so much power and we are building on standing on the shoulders of giants. individually and collectively. So I would invite you to think about that. Let me know who are those, your own personal heroines, those women who made you brave. Maybe it was your mothers and your grandmothers. Maybe it was an aunt. Maybe it was a neighbor down the street. I would love to know. Let's celebrate these women who made us brave, because they're pretty awesome and amazing, and they helped us to be awesome and amazing. I hope you have a fantastical day. I hope that you can look at this for what it is and see past all of the crazy little randomness. Remember that you're awesome, you're wonderful, and yes, my dear, you are brave. Have a great day.